Howdy, it's Mr. Pete, your YouTube shop teacher, and this is the first in a series of videos that I'm going to make that are actually Mr. Pete's anecdotes or Mr. Pete's stories from childhood or from years ago. You know, my life isn't extraordinary at all, but I do believe that I did a lot of things as a youngster that most kids did not do. Mainly because my brother and I had complete freedom. We had wonderful parents, but very, very little supervision, so we pretty much did whatever we wanted to, as long as we didn't get hurt too bad. And believe it or not, with all of our escapades, we didn't have too many injuries that were worth even mentioning. But I'm going to start off by telling you a story about the FBI, and they've been very controversial in the news lately. Well, this particular story is from about 1956, so I was 13 years old and my brother was 14 years old. And in fact, my brother was involved, or the main figure in many of these stories, because he was more adventurous, he was smarter, and he lived his own life without listening to anyone. He was really kind of a renegade, although not a bad person, not a bad boy, but you weren't going to get much work out of Jan because he was busy in the shop. He was a gun builder, gun maker, since he was about 9 or 10 years old, and that's really what this story revolves around. I'm going to try to keep these anecdotes kind of short, but I don't know how that's going to go because this is number one. But to repeat myself, this was about 1956, and I know that because Dad had just bought a television, a 24-inch Westinghouse, black and white, terrible set, nothing but snow. But the reason I tell you that is because this was after school on a weekday, and I was sitting in the living room watching the boob tube, even in this must have been about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And to start with, there's no programming in these early days of television, so I'm just watching the test pattern, if you know what that is. Maybe I can flash one of those up on the screen for you. But, and I'm getting ready to watch the Mickey Mouse Club. Now, I was a little too old for that, but I wasn't too old to be having a crush on Annette Funicello. So that's why I was watching the Mickey Mouse Club. But of course, what boy in the entire United States didn't have a crush on Annette? So let me back up just a little bit. Since my brother was constantly building guns, usually of his own design, you might even call them well, what did the gangbangers use? Zip guns. They were almost like zip guns, but we didn't intend to do anything bad with them. And again, we had access to 22 cartridges and all of that when we were really way too young to have that stuff. But Jan was now, that's my brother Jan, who's a year and a half older than me. He had purchased out of the back of a Popular Science or gun magazine, because he got all of those publications even when he was little, a little 1-inch ad in the back of the magazine advertised plans to build a gun that would fit in your pocket, almost like a big Sharpie. Matter of fact, it looked about like a Sharpie is what I remember. So for $1, he sent away for those plans. All right, now back to the FBI. So I'm sitting on the couch, and I'm only about 10 feet away from the front door, and all of a sudden, someone knocked at the door. So I got up, and we got a lot of company when I was a kid, so this was no big deal. But here's a man in a gray flannel suit wearing a felt hat, and I said, well, can I help you? And he said, is your dad home? And then, well, yeah. Dad! Dad! So I let the man in, even though I didn't know who he was yet, and in comes my dad, and said, yeah, what's the matter? And the man whipped into his pocket, pulled out the FBI badge or ID or whatever it was from that time. I'm not so sure what it was. And I looked out onto the street, 7th Street there, and there was a government car, a nondescript 56 Ford that said, for official use only. So I heard a little bit of mumbling and soft conversation. I'm only 10 feet away. And Suddenly my dad turned around and yelled for my brother, who was down the basement, by the way. He was always down the basement until he discovered girls. "John!" And he didn't answer, so both my dad and the agent went down. He was a middle-aged man. Went down the basement where my brother was actually at that very moment working on that little pen gun. I do not remember just how far along he got with it. We didn't have a whole lot of tools, mainly a hacksaw file and an electric drill. That was about the only, and a sander. So anyway, they went down there and the FBI agent proceeded to ask for the plans and confiscated them. That is, stole them. That is, seized private property. Now I think, like I said, it was only $1, but that would be equal to $10 in today's money. So up the stairs came, my brother didn't come up. I think he was really mad or disgusted or something. And the agent had that piece of paper in his hand, and he wasn't there very long. And I believe what he said to Dad is that they were going around. They had the address list from whoever sold the plans, and went around and basically confiscated every one that they could get their hands on. And I'm sure 98% of the people weren't going to build it anyway. If we would have had a Xerox machine back then, I'm sure my brother would have made a copy right away. Well, if you've ever had an FBI agent or CIA or anybody like that come to your house, leave a comment, because I bet there isn't a single person that's watching this that had this experience, even though it wasn't terrible, I should say, for any of our family. Although my dad, again, was disgusted with Jan kind of getting himself into trouble, even though he didn't really do anything wrong at that time, and gave up the plans willingly. I don't know what would have happened if he refused, or if we had already lost them or something of that nature. You may notice that in some of my videos that I do not trust the government, and I do not like authority in general, and possibly that attitude started from that experience that our family had with the FBI. And you know, even by 1956, we knew that J. Edgar Hoover, the head of the FBI, was a drag queen, and you know, it was already crazy way back in the 50s, maybe even before that. So, you know, and the FBI is still questionable. Not so much the field agents, but the leadership in Washington, they say, is pretty darn corrupt. So that may have nothing to do with the story I just told you, but that's my reading and my feeling about authority. If you liked this video, be sure and give me a thumbs up and tell your friends about it, because I have a lot more stories similar to this that usually involved my brother Jan, or me in my childhood. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode, if there is one. So long for now.